just weeks after the end of World War II. Here in the French countryside, a quiet but extraordinary rekindling of the human spirit took place. These young Jewish boys, hundreds of them, orphaned by the Holocaust, were brought here after the war to rebuild their shattered lives.
Those homes were very, very special, and I remember that these homes with great, great affection and tenderness and melancholy and nostalgia. To learn how to rediscover joy and affection, these are very special privileges.
France was the rebirth of our soul, of our existence. Everything they did was to salvage these souls that survived hell.
After years of suffering and loss, these boys were brought back to life during their time in the French children's homes. From darkness into light, this is the journey of the boys of Bוכnוואלד. After 57 years, the boys of Bוכnוואלד are returning to one of the homes, to Écuy, in Normandy. This was their first stop after they were liberated from the Bוכnוואלד concentration camp. The bonds of friendship they formed here, after being rescued from the clutches of death, have lasted to this day.
Well.
They've come from all over the world to be together again. Still very much the boys.
How are you, boys?
You're well? Yeah. How are you?
We were sweet. Dis-moi, Romain, quel est votre programme là?
Tellement long. J'étais à Paris il y a peut-être 40 ans, non, 30 ans.
When the boys arrived here, they were traumatized children, victims of the Nazi Holocaust. They began to form a fraternity based on need. They had no one else. They had lost everything.
Yeah. Let's see what you have. My tickets to come to France.
Oh, voilà, il y en a des plus belles.
Des filles?
Ah oui, il y en a un petit peu beau.
C'est toi, ça, chérie?
That's me. Here, when we are going out of Bוכnוואלד, of the camp. Yeah, you, I recognize you. You are here.
Here, and my brother. Where are you? You know? Are you on it?
You are on here?
Let me see where you are.
And
Oh, God.
Out of 1.5 million Jewish children in Europe at the start of World War II, barely 5,000 survived the concentration camps. 1,000 of these kids were found clinging to life at Bוכnוואלד in Germany when they were liberated by the U.S. Army on April 11, 1945.
I remember thinking of so many things, but mostly I remember wanting to go home. And I wanted to show off to my family that I survived. In my mind, I visualized them all waiting for me.
The will to live with me was very strong. I wanted to live, I wanted to see my sisters, I wanted to see my mother. Maybe I knew my mother's not there, but somehow I thought maybe they didn't kill her. They took away people that didn't say they're going to put them in crematoriums. We didn't believe, how can people do such thing? In all my mind that I will see my parents again.
But he never would. That these young boys had survived at all was a miracle. Most had lost their entire families. Their U.S. liberators were stunned to find child survivors and were simply not equipped to care for them. The Army quickly sought help from an international children's aid group, OSE, Organisation Secours les Enfants. Judith Hemmendinger, herself a Jewish refugee, worked for OSE in Geneva.
I saw that cable, that there were 1,000 children liberated in Bוכnוואלד. they asked those in Geneva that those children should come out of Bוכנוואלד immediately.
Switzerland was prepared to take 280 boys, England 250, and on June 7th, 1945, 426 were shipped off to France.
They told us we're going to go to France. And we were very excited. Not where we're going in France, but we're going.
Destined for the unknown, sharing a uniquely tragic past, the boys were naturally drawn to each other.
We were on the train coming to Italy. We already felt that power of friendship. That train ride, which lasted a few days, was very special. It was very special to me. We received from the American Army, I remember, cookies. And the first thing we did, we shared our cookies. Now, that was funny, childish, but the gesture of giving and receiving, we learned immediately what is friendship if not an art, the supreme art of learning to give and to receive, sometimes at the same time. And I found it in the train.
The idea of going to France was sort of bittersweet. In a way, we had to accept and realize that we can't go home. So that door was shut. We need to make a new life. So that was the beginning of that journey.
J'avais déjà l'âge.
Oh yeah,
C'est ça, exactement.
Oublie pas, c'est 57 ans déjà.
This must be the bedroom there that I was talking about. Wow. Yeah, I think I was on the top floor. Yeah. Unbelievable. Wow, this is the room I slept in. Oh God, so many thoughts that I had in this room. Really, it was in here that I really assessed the whole situation, my survival, the start of my life, and all the ones that didn't make it. Now, being in this room really makes me think of all that could have been, and isn't, all those lives that never happened. A lot of sadness. In 1944, beginning of 44, so I was 13, 14. I had already been a few years in different camps. So I was growing up pretty quick. You know, I was, I think, maybe 14 going on 40. When we finally arrived in Bוכnוואלד and they opened the doors, I remember thinking, I'm not going to make it from here. This is too awful. These prisoners looked like they were from another world. That they weren't real. And I thought to myself, if this is what happens in this camp, forget it. I've been pretty lucky up to this point. I didn't think I was going to survive.
As people were arriving from other camps, and I knew my father was in a camp too, and I was looking out from the window. It was a Sunday, we didn't work on Sunday, and looking out, and I saw a man looking like my father, and I ran out, and I grabbed him, I said, Tatishi. And he looked at me strange, like, who are you? And then I realized he was not my father. I was really broken down. There's something I can never forget.
In the concentration camps, these child prisoners, robbed of their families, grasped at strangers to sustain them. They lived for the occasional kind word, a warm feeling, someone to connect with. When Robbie met Abe Chapnick during the war, they were just 13 years old. They formed one of the first long-lasting bonds between the boys. They've remained extremely close over the years and often travel great distances to be together.
I don't think I've ever told you how I felt when I met you there. I had just been separated from my father. I had just witnessed the killing of my brother next to me, and I was a wreck. And you supplied that bond that we have now at that time. You know, when I start thinking back how I felt, you were a godsend. You became my father, my brother, everything that I needed.
They put us on a potato peeling.
On potato duty?
Potato duty, right.
Well, that wasn't so bad.
No, that was very good. And you, for some reason or other, had missed your call in the morning and wound up in the same place. And I guess that was the stroke of luck that brought us together. And from there on, I think we have been constantly together.
The importance of having this kind of bond with Abe was, I think, probably a lifesaver, you know, because we needed something to hang on to, something real, because everything around us was so unreal. It was surreal, everything, and the hunger and the misery and all the horrors all around us. You needed something that was tangible, and we had this between us.
When they arrived in France, the boys struggled to adjust to new authority figures. Having been treated worse than animals by their Nazi caretakers, they trusted no one. Gabby Cohen, known as Nini at the time, was asked to help look after the boys.
We are waiting for a group of young children, survivors of the camps, who come to France, and we need kindergarten teachers who know another language besides French.
So unprepared were the Ose staff. They had hastily set up the homes in preparation for small children. Little did they know that only a very few small children had survived the concentration camps.
They prepared night shirts for everybody, but only the 3 youngest could go in.
Not only were there just a handful of young boys, the older boys who arrived were often difficult to deal with.
They looked for me completely wild. And they were speaking all the time, and then suddenly there was a big clock at 7 o'clock, and they all bell, you know, a big bell, and they all stand, run to the dining room, and ate a lot, and that was finished in 7 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes. Nothing was left. Yes, I thought, I've never seen something like that.
We were like uncivilized, unbrought up. We didn't have table manners. We would throw stuff, we would throw food, and then we would pick it off the ground and put it in our pocket so we could take it with us to the room.
I will tell you something. Once you were taking here lunch, he was sitting by me, and he had taken my bread.
He remembers everything.
I wanted to kill him. It's true, it's true. No, that's true.
In the beginning, there were so many of us who didn't eat the whole meal, who kept bread or cake under the pillow, because still being afraid that tomorrow there will be no bread or no cake or something. So we were like beggars, taking moments of happiness and trust and put them in our pockets for tomorrow.
They couldn't figure us out, I remember.
No, first of all,
we were immediately branded les enfants terribles, remember?
We were the monsters that will never be civilized again.
They were not terrible, they were horrible, I mean, because they always made whatever they wanted to do. You couldn't tell them do this or do that, or you couldn't.
I always felt sorry for our educators who thought they can teach us. My God, they felt so inadequate, and rightly so. What could they tell us? We knew so much more than the youngest in our midst knew more than the oldest of my teachers.
Robbed of their youthful innocence, having witnessed unthinkable horrors, the boys were considered by some educators and psychologists to be psychopaths, damaged beyond repair. The boys soon realized that people who hadn't been through the camps couldn't possibly understand, so they kept it all to themselves. But their rage and sorrow came out in other ways.
I remember throwing a bunch of beds together and we put a match to it. We burned some of the beds. There was this anger in us. We had to get it out somehow.
In order to cope with the inhumanity they had been forced to endure, the boys developed a hard emotional shell that was tough to crack.
We had to learn how to cry. Normal emotions that one has were foreign to us. We laughed, but it was artificial. It didn't come from the heart. We didn't know how to cry. It was a few months afterwards. You know, I think the first time I cried is really when Abe left, when he found a relative. One day before going to bed, I sat down and I said, Abe isn't here. I had nobody from my family. I don't know if they're alive. And I started crying. And it was the first emotion that I had for years and years.
Over the course of several weeks at Écouis, the boys began to adjust to life outside the concentration camps. Now they were divided into smaller, more manageable groups according to their needs. The older, more religious boys who preferred a kosher home were moved to a chateau near Vendôme called Amboise. Another group went to a home at Le Vésinet, just outside Paris.
Voilà, c'est ce que je dis, elle était par là, ça je m'en rappelle.
Ça n'existait pas.
Non, ça n'existe pas.
Parce que c'est là-bas.
Alors,
c'est devenu privé maintenant.
C'est privé. Mais ils ont changé parce que c'était 12.
C'était 12, François là.
Bonjour.
Bonjour.
Bonjour, madame. Voilà, c'est Jasmin. Bonjour. Bonjour.
Revisiting Le Vésinet today, the boys' memories are an intriguing revelation to Madame Jasmin, daughter of the woman who loaned the house to Osée after the war.
Je me souviens de cet escalier.
L'escalier, et puis il y avait d'autres choses ici.
Non, mais c'était un escalier qui...
This was a very meaningful place. It was a beginning of a different sort. It was a beginning of career, of what are you going to become, what are you going to be, where are you going to be, what are you going to do with yourself. This was a more sobering place for that.
Quand je viens ici, peut-être où il y avait des bureaux, comment c'était ici?
This place is, you know, it has some very lovely furniture now, but when we lived in here, it was just beds, nothing else, and tables, very simple tables. But, you know, the magic in here is still here.
The life in Vésinet was very nice. I mean, we didn't live in luxury, but we had